Hello and welcome. I'm Rawia Alami and this is the Dailies, where we take a look at important news stories, reports, analysis and articles published in newspapers and media outlets across the world. Most newspapers continue to focus on the Middle East ahead of the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's anticipated visit to Washington on Monday. Many reported on President Trump's announcement that Israel agreed to a 60-day ceasefire in Gaza, as well as Hamas's acceptance and insistence that any agreement must include the end of the war. Other media outlets focused on the latest developments in Ukraine and President Putin's announcement of Russian control over Luhansk. In America, the narrow pass of President Trump's big tax bill in the Senate attracted a lot of attention from American newspapers today, with many publishing various analysis on how this bill will affect America's lives or Americans' lives and America's fiscal future. We'll start with the Washington Post, which tried to break down and explain what the tax bill means for Americans' health care. The report says that the bill would dramatically reshape health care for millions of Americans, and the bill slashes more than $1 trillion from Medicaid and Medicare and the Affordable Care Act, with the Congressional Budget Office projecting at least 12 million people will lose health coverage over the next decade. Also, new work requirements, higher co-pays and stricter eligibility checks could push vulnerable families, rural hospitals and nursing homes to the brink. The report goes on to say that the bill also threatens funding for Planned Parenthood and abortion providers, risking clinic closures and job losses. The report quotes critics who warn that these deep cuts gamble with the nation's health and social safety net, trading coverage for tax breaks and risking a spike in the uninsured rate unseen in years. The New York Times published a news analysis highlighting the risky gamble Senate Republicans took by narrowly passing a sweeping tax and spending bill that slashes Medicaid and food aid to fund $4.5 trillion in permanent tax cuts. Critics warn that the bill could indeed strip health coverage from nearly 12 million people and drive up the national debt by at least $3.3 trillion over the next decade. Internal GOP divisions and also last-minute deals exposed deep unease, with some Republicans calling the process agonizing and also warning that the cuts will hurt vulnerable Americans and backfire politically. The bill also breaks long-standing budget rules, raising fears of a future debt crisis. Now, Republicans must defend their plan to a skeptical public and brace for fierce attacks in the 2026 elections. We'll stay with the New York Times, which published a report revealing that a rare, important phone call took place between French President Emmanuel Macron and Russian President Vladimir Putin, the first since 2022. The two leaders found common ground on the need to prevent nuclear escalation in Iran, agreeing to coordinate efforts as members of the UN Security Council. However, they remain deeply divided over the war in Ukraine. Macron pressed Putin for a ceasefire and also reaffirmed France's strong support for Ukraine's sovereignty. But Putin blamed the West for the conflict and insisted any peace must reflect Russia's territorial gains. The report notes that both leaders are trying to reassert their influence after being sidelined by recent U.S. actions in the Middle East. The call signals cautious diplomatic engagement, but major disagreements remain. After Moscow announced for the first time it has fully seized the area of eastern Ukraine, namely the Luhansk region, the Times published a report asking whether that could change the course of the war. The report explains that while the Kremlin hails this as a major milestone, military analysts caution that the capture is unlikely to change the overall course of the war. Luhansk also, as you might know, had already been mostly under Russian control, and the region's fall does not deliver Ukraine a decisive military blow or bring Moscow closer to its initial, more ambitious war aims. The report quotes experts who note that the advance came at enormous cost and does not give Russia momentum, as Ukrainian forces are now better positioned to defend the remaining territory in Donetsk. The Telegraph published a report highlighting how, while the world's attention was indeed on Iran, President Putin has quietly expanded Russia's war aims in Ukraine, declaring all of Ukraine as ours and launching new offensives beyond the 4 regions Russia claimed to annex in 2022. Russian troops are now pushing into Sumy and also threatening Kharkiv, signaling a return to broader ambitions after years of stalled progress. Analysts note that despite some recent territorial gains, Russia's advances remain slow and costly, and Ukraine's defenses are still holding in key areas. Peace talks have stalled, with both sides far apart on terms. While Putin's rhetoric and wider campaign raises the stakes, most experts say these moves are unlikely to deliver a quick breakthrough or fundamentally change the war's grinding nature. To the Financial Times now, where Lana Nuseibeh wrote an opinion article highlighting the urgent call from Gulf leaders for a new approach to peace in the Middle East after Iran's attack on Qatar and years of regional conflict. Lana, by the way, is Assistant Minister for Political Affairs and Special Envoy of the UAE Minister of Foreign Affairs. The article points out that at an emergency summit, the UAE and its partners stressed that military force and extremist ideologies have failed to bring lasting security. They urged President Trump to build on the Abraham Accords and push for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, warning that the region is at a crossroads. The author argues that only bold diplomacy, economic integration, and a just solution for Palestinians can end the cycle of violence. The UAE calls for all regional players, including Israel, Iran, and Arab states, to lead a new era of stability and prosperity, emphasizing that the time for a comprehensive deal is now. After President Trump's intention to be firm with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu during his upcoming U.S. visit, as well as claims that Israel agreed to a 60-day ceasefire in Gaza, Israel Hayom published an opinion article by Ariel Kahana detailing how the Netanyahu-Trump partnership is reshaping the Middle East. The article spotlights the historic third meeting in 6 months between Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and U.S. President Donald Trump, anticipated next week as both leaders celebrate their joint operation crippling Iran's nuclear program. Kahana says that despite speculation, Trump is unlikely to force Netanyahu into a truce in Gaza without meeting Israeli conditions. The article notes that normalization with Arab states remains stalled as long as fighting continues in Gaza. The article concludes that with peace talks deadlocked and major challenges ahead, the summit highlights both leaders' alignment and the limits of U.S. pressure on Israel. And we'll end with the Wall Street Journal, which published a report spotlighting how Chinese AI companies are rapidly closing the gap with American leaders, challenging U.S. dominance in the global AI race. Chinese models like DeepSeek and Alibaba Qwen now rival U.S. systems in quality and are being adopted worldwide, from banks in Europe to universities in Africa. The report quotes a study of global competitiveness in critical technologies released in early June by researchers at Harvard University, saying that it found China has advantages in 2 key building blocks of AI: data and human capital, that are helping it to keep pace. And hence, Chinese companies have started to snatch customers by offering performance that is nearly as good at vastly lower prices. The report also includes a chart showing the rank and score of each company's top performing model on evaluation chatbot arena. Despite US export controls and advanced chips, China's heavy investment, open source strategy, and focus on practical applications have fueled its rise. Experts warn that this AI rivalry could split the world into US and China-aligned tech spheres, costing American firms billions and undermining global cooperation on AI safety. The piece concludes that China's swift progress is forcing the US to rethink its strategy as the race for AI supremacy intensifies. That's it for today. Thanks for watching.